All right, so hello and welcome everyone to the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy. I am Susanna joining you from Espoo, Finland, and I will be your host today. I'm a big fan of Buddhism, recovery, and Buddhist recovery. I facilitate both 8-step recovery meetings and mindfulness-based addiction recovery courses here in Finland. I'm a member of the board of the Buddhist Recovery Network. And today we have a new academy teaching offered by Vanessa Wang, who is also in the Buddhist Recovery Network board. And the pronouns are she and her. Thanks for the offering and joining us today. The topic for the teaching is seeing ourselves in the face of suffering, loss, trauma, and joy. And I will be telling about the teaching a little bit later on. Thanks for everybody for being here and being part of our community. And then a few words about Dana. So all of our teachings are given freely, and we are blessed to have some amazing teachers like Vanessa, who have experience on the cushion, experience working with body, speech, and mind, experience in the ongoing practice of recovery by the way of Dharma. As we practice the Buddha's teaching of generosity, we invite you to give dana that will be given to support our ongoing Buddhist Recovery Network meetings and to support the teacher. You can give an one-time or recurring basis using the link posted in the chat field. Please be sure to indicate that your donation is for the Academy, and we sincerely thank you for your generosity. So I will be posting the dana link there shortly, like for you to see, so you can go already to make a donation if you wish, like that. And then to the main point of today, I'd like to introduce our guest teacher, and now I will be spotlighting our teacher for today, and I will be introducing as well. So Vanessa Wang is currently in clinical psychology PhD student at Southern Illinois University Carbondale. Her research focus is on the intersectionality of Buddhist psychology and Western psychology. She brings her passion of advocating for diversity, inclusivity, equity, accessibility, and social justice in both her clinical work and research. And I'm sorry, English is not my first language, so bear with me when some of the words might be a little bit tricky. Among these, decolonizing Western Dharma is an issue that is close to her heart. Vanessa earned a master's in religious studies with a focus on Buddhism at University of the West in Los Angeles. She gained passion in learning about Buddhism and its liberating effects of mental struggles when she was studying at a forest monastery in Taipei, Taiwan, about 10 years ago. Vanessa is also in recovery from substances, addictive behaviors, depression, and trauma. She's involved in both Buddhist Recovery Network and Recovery Dharma Global. Vanessa is also spoken word poet, plant lover, and boba fanatic. I hope I got that right. And as said before, the topic of the teaching is seeing ourselves in the face of suffering, loss, trauma, and joy. So Vanessa will share about the inevitable suffering and loss in life. Life can be easily confusing at times, and often we cannot really find ourselves in the full spin of our existence. In this sharing, we will discuss about the nature of suffering, the cause of suffering, and the benefits of suffering. Most importantly, we will talk about how to see ourselves and the compassion that arises in doing so. So Vanessa, the stage or the screen is all yours.
Thanks, Susanna, for that lovely introduction. I'm really grateful for BIN for inviting me, for Susanna for supporting, and Melissa is not here today, but shout out to them for inviting me as well. Okay, let's start with the meditation. And if someone can give me a thumbs up, if you can hear the bell when I ring it, but for time being, just settle into the space that you're in now. Okay, so let's come into this space with the joy of community, of Sangha, Buddha, and Dharma. So coming into this space and noticing the spot that we're in now. Perhaps it's a cushion, the floor, a bed, or a chair. Just noticing how the body is touching the surface. Taking a deep breath in and out. And for time being, just notice the breathing. Breathing in, I notice I am breathing in. And breathing out, I notice I am breathing out. And the mind will wander, and that's perfectly okay. That's what minds do. Every time the mind wanders, just take the mind back to focusing on the breath. You can notice the length of the breath. Breathing in, I bring in a long breath. Breathing out, I exhale a short breath. And just noticing the breath. Be very kind to yourself. We may come into this space together from different life experiences. Maybe nothing was going on and you were feeling peaceful already. Or maybe it's already been a very long day. At this moment, for now, we temporarily let that go. The things that we were doing before this, and the planning for the things that we're doing after this. Let it go away with the breath. There's nothing to do, nowhere to go, and nothing to become. Now let's feel how this body is experiencing this present moment. Perhaps the body is very reactive, almost like an earthquake shaking. If that's the case, just feel it. You can notice to yourself, the body is reactive right now. Perhaps it is in the chest that we feel the most feelings, sensations, in the stomach, in the throat. Perhaps the body is feeling rather calm, and if that's the case, then we also just feel it. This is what calmness feels like. So whatever it is that the body is experiencing right now, just kind of see it with a sense of curiosity. How is my body experiencing this moment right now? Letting the body breathe in and out. Now our emotions are overwhelming. The body and the breath is our anchor. Coming back to this moment again and again and again. You can even ask yourself, am I truly accepting all that is happening at this moment? Not as a judgmental reprimand, but simply inquiring, am I truly accepting all that has arisen? And if something comes up that we're holding on to, watch it kindly and then allow it to go away. Sometimes we notice the grasping in our body when we're holding on to a thought, a feeling, or a memory. We feel a tension in our body. And so we can direct our attention to that part of the body as well. I'm holding on to something right now. I see you. And then see if you can kind of relax into feeling this body. We spend too much time in our head thinking. And so let's see if we can direct the attention fully to the grounding effects of the body and just resting in this awareness. Now there's a sense of ease when we feel the body as it is, not pursuing or rejecting, and just relaxing into whatever chaos is in the body right now. And so try to see if you can tap into that ease and relaxation. If there's a sense of resistance or doubt, just notice it and kind of accept it with a smile on your face. And then letting it go. And then with the awareness of our body, resting in this awareness, we can try to expand our awareness to beyond the body. Think of your awareness as 360 degrees. You can surround and look what's around your body, before and behind the body, above the body. Imagining this awareness that keeps on expanding to your entire house, limitlessly. And we're just resting in this kind of openness. Letting go of defenses, letting go of control. Just resting in a sense of openness and acceptance. And then if you're feeling that openness and that spaciousness, perhaps you can allow or even just feel a sense of joy that naturally arises. A natural kindness that just comes into the space. A sense of gratitude. And just see how that feels like in the body as well. Feeling the sensations in the body with a unity and openness. The body and the mind as one. And the mind and phenomena as one. Expansive and spacious. And just relaxing in this energy. And then take a few more breaths in and out, knowing that this meditation is coming to an end. And whatever it is that we did how we did. We simply let it go. Breathing in, breathing out. Okay, and then if you're ready, you can come into the space. And however it is that you experience that meditation, let it go. If it's resistance that came up or calm and peacefulness, that moment has passed, but we can appreciate it. Okay. Okay. So, Susanna, do I go ahead and, okay, got it. So, I really hope that our time together today is not understood as my Dharma teachings, but simply just me sharing my experiences and my learning on this path as fellow learners. And I just want to pass on the Dharma that I have received in the past. Okay, so about 2 weeks ago, my therapy client who was struggling with depression took their own life. And it was very heartbreaking to me. I have been on this Buddhist path for close to a decade now. And my primary Buddhist tradition has an emphasis on how to face death once that moment comes. But the loss was not something I was prepared for. It was very incomprehensible. And despite all of the readings and all those time I spent studying how Buddhism sees life and death, I could not understand at that moment when I learned about my client's death, how a life could just disappear in the blink of an eye. And I remember thinking I scheduled our sessions for every single week, and I did my part as the therapist. So shouldn't they keep coming back for our sessions? So I come to this space today with all of you still grieving for this loss. And given the topic today, there's this ancient Hawaiian cleansing exercise that can help us with making peace with overwhelming emotions surrounding our sense of self. When shame, guilt, sadness, anger, anxiety, or any kind of unpleasant emotions arise, you can say to yourself these phrases: I am sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. Say it wholeheartedly and repeat it again and again until you feel a shift in your body. And this is one of the ways that we can make peace with ourselves. So if you want to try it with me right now, please feel free to do so. If there are any unpleasant thoughts and feelings present with you, you can focus on it and repeat these phrases. And you can put a hand on your chest and focus on the feeling and thought and say, I am sorry. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I love you. And you can keep saying it repeatedly until you feel a shift in the body. And maybe you feel a sense of relief, resistance, relaxation, anxiety, or freedom. Regardless, just keep saying it until you feel like the moment has come to end. And so you can kind of note in your body how it feels to see ourselves this way with such compassion and forgiveness and humility. And again, if this practice is not helpful, I simply ask that you let it go too. So as I said, I recently lost a client and I have been grieving. There was one night, my heart was very heavy and I was pondering whether or not there's any meaning in persisting in a helping profession when I cannot even prevent my client from taking their life. And all of a sudden, I saw a notification on my email And it said that my article that I was writing for a while has just been accepted by an academic journal. And I remember shaking my head in disbelief. The best thing that could happen and the worst thing that could happen to me in my career path, they both happened around the same time period, both completely out of my control and just entirely random. And it was a moment of impermanence knocking on my door, reminding me of the true nature of life. And with that, it came a sense of surrender. Our lives are full of moments like this. We show up and do our best, or what we think is the best at the moment. And what happens next is sometimes completely out of our control. Sometimes life feels like a movie script, where both the actor and the audience is finding out about what happens next as the movie is played. And this happens with our existence too. We were born, we show up in this world, and then the things that happened after us being born were oftentimes out of control. It feels like we cannot really choose the family that we were born into, the environment that raised us, the geographical location that we were born in, the skin color that we were given, or how others decide to treat us. It would be nice to think that we were born into an equal society where we all have great upbringings and fantastic successes in life, and everyone just treats each other with harmony and compassion. But as we all know, the life that we live in is not quite like that. Some of us struggle with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, self-harming thoughts, addiction, trauma, or grief. And there's injustice in our society too, like racism and all sorts of oppression. Besides that, we also have to deal with the everyday stress in life. There are bills to pay, jobs to do, love for us to seek, kids to raise, and dreams to pursue. And there always seems to be something that we have to fix in life. When we see our lives this way, it perhaps seems all dark and gloomy and hopeless. But this Buddhist path gives us a different way to interpret these sufferings. The first thing we should know about suffering is that it is not just universal, but it is the best place for us to learn how to cultivate our well-being. We see in sutras that among all 6 realms, it is only in the human realm that we have the optimal opportunity to become a Buddha or Bodhisattva. And it's very normal that when bad things happen, we go into self-blame or shame and think, oh, why is this happening to me? Or poor me. And perhaps the reason why these things are happening to us is because there's a wisdom to be gained on the other side of the mountain. There's this Confucius phrase that my dad used to make me memorize, which annoyed me every single time. But now there seems to be some sort of wisdom in it. It says that if the heavens were to bestow upon a person great responsibilities, this person shall be challenged tremendously, both physically and mentally. So we're challenged physically, mentally, and perhaps spiritually because there are great presents awaiting ahead of us. And at the same time, research in psychology suggested that those who see suffering as a privilege and opportunity to grow and learn tend to have the most resiliency. Tibetan Buddhist refugees in Dharamsala saw suffering as a chance to practice compassion and transform their intentions. In suffering, as painful and unfair as it may seem at the moment, there is a wisdom that is being offered on the flip side of things. We just have to notice it, as hard as it can be. A couple of years ago, I was manipulated out of a lot of money, and I almost didn't have a place to stay at. And at first, I was pissed at that person. That really was a criminal. I thought if I didn't know evil before, I now have. I simply could not understand why a person would do these things for a living. And I later found out that these professional criminals and the country of origin that they come from And I had a friend who was from the same country, and she explained to me how these individuals lived their life and how the crime was organized in their countries, and how they spent all this money not on raising their family, but on parties and drugs. Once they have spent all the money, they come back to target victims again. And I remember thinking to myself, well, what is samsara then? And that kind of sounds like when I was deep in my addiction. And I remained pretty angry for a while until eventually I realized how much suffering and unhappiness they must have. It cannot feel good to live like that. What kind of true happiness do they have in life, if not simply fleeting moments of adrenaline? There's a passage in Dhammapada that goes, "The unwise man, lacking understanding, behaves as if he were his own worst enemy, committing evil deeds that produce evil fruits." So when we act without mindfulness, wisdom, and morality, we normally pursue temporary happiness that end up becoming the suffering of our own. And no one else can take that burden away from us except for ourselves. So going back to that story, it took me a while, but now I don't feel any resentment anymore. When thinking about this incident, it really is just compassion left. It became a strength to the Bodhisattva vow, a reminder of how we can suffer as humans, kind of like watching a younger loved one making a terrible mistake outside of home, and all that we want is for them to come home. And I'm still paying the financial loans for this experience, and truly I wish it has never happened. But I think they're great teachers in my life. They are a reminder of the person I used to be when I was in my addiction, a reminder of second chances, of how lost we can be without insight and wisdom, and a reminder that if we really, really wish so, our compassion is deeply healing for ourselves and those around us. In the past, research in psychology suggested that resiliency means bouncing back from trauma. And that would suggest that there's a baseline of individual well-being and that we can come back to that baseline, which means recovery. But nowadays, more and more theories in psychology are now leaning into Eastern spiritual traditions and suggest that resiliency means allowing ourselves to be transformed by trauma. This would suggest that there is not a fixed, absolute, permanent self, or even a baseline to return to. We're growing and expanding as we go. Perhaps the thought of letting trauma to transform ourselves may be a bit scary to think about. Most of us don't really like changes, and we have gotten used to who we are as a person. At the thought of this, some may think, transform into what? I'm very used to the way I am. I worked hard to become the person I am, and I want this situation to change, not me. And as valid as that may be, research found that Tibetan Buddhist refugees in Dharamsala saw resiliency as not just compassion, but also as seeing themselves as transforming into the spacious, flexible, and open sky. So this spacious, flexible openness is really what we want the suffering to help us realize. So let's talk about suffering more for a moment. Our desire to want things is often at the core of our suffering, and this can be understood as the second noble truth. Some understood it as craving, clinging, or grasping, depending on the translation. We want things to stay the same, or we want things to be different. This can also be craving of life or the end of life, craving for existence or non-existence of things and people. And then this craving then leads to attachment. And attachment can include two kinds of attachment. We have the attachment to self and the attachment to phenomena. The attachment to self is the kind of grasping that is the most difficult to eradicate. Across Buddhist traditions, we're often reminded of the consequences of overly grasping onto our self-identity. Some would suggest when we realize the nature of non-self, then there goes most of the suffering. But this kind of non-self or emptiness that we're talking about is not nothingness. It's not nihilism. It doesn't mean complete nothingness, and it doesn't mean detachment. As Dalai Lama explained in his book, emptiness exists in interdependent arising. We can think of this non-self as a single drop of water in a flow of river. When you look at that single drop of water at it from a fixed point, it is as if it's a separate thing, but in the flow of river, it is one and the same with the unity of consciousness. Our mind is hence that single drop of water in the flow of river. Or you can simply think of it as an open, spacious sky with clouds and storms coming to visit from time to time. So when we meditate and the mind settles, experienced meditators often feel a sense of formlessness. And within that, when we feel a grounding and openness, we naturally feel the interconnectedness and interdependent arising with all beings. And with that, compassion, ease, and joy will naturally arise. So who are we really? Who is this person feeling all the sadness, the drunken monkey mind, as Sutra described it, the anxiety, grief, and loss, or sometimes happiness and joy that we experience? I would like to read the following passage by Shantideva from Buddhikaya. All the harm with which this world is rife, all fear and suffering that there is, clinging to the I has caused it. What am I to do with this great demon? If this I is not relinquished wholly, sorrow likewise cannot be avoided. For if he does not keep away from fire, a man cannot escape from being burned. This is a writing with a quite serious undertone. So let me read yet another passage from Ajahn Chah from Buddhayana. This mind is an uncertain thing. This body is uncertain. Together they are impermanent. Together they are a source of suffering. Together they are devoid of self. These, the Buddha pointed out, are neither a being, nor a person, nor a self, nor a soul, nor us, nor they. They are merely elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. Elements only. When the mind sees this, it will rid itself of attachment, which holds that I am beautiful, I am good, I am evil, I am suffering, I have, I this, or I that. You will experience a state of unity, where you'll have seen that all of mankind is basically the same. There is no I, there are only elements. So these elements can also be understood as the 5 faculties, or skandhas, or body, feeling, the thinking mind, our behaviors, or some translated as volitional activities, and consciousness. So when we understand ourselves this way, we're not fixated on a storyline of ourselves, or even seeing ourselves as this concrete, absolute, never-changing being. And with that, naturally, freedom comes. Our mind is nothing but habits, and those habits include a constantly chattering voice that's narrating every single thing that's going on around us. Very often, that voice is evaluating who we are as a person and what we're doing, or who others are as a person and what they're doing. We have in our minds expectation of who we are and what others should be. Very often, people beat themselves up when they cannot meet the expectation of who they think they should be as a person. A year ago, I found myself in a big transition, moving across the country to start a PhD program. It was very difficult to get used to a new environment. It was a new academic surrounding, new people, being in a remote college town in the Midwest. There was a lot of microaggression that took place on a daily basis that I was not used to. It was very stressful, depressing, and lonely. When I applied to the program, I had a whole set of identities that I really held onto, and I proudly pronounced and sold in the interview during the application process. But once the program actually started, these tags that I so proudly gave myself started to crumble one by one. These labels that I gave myself and so proudly held onto didn't seem to mean anything to anyone else. I had always prided myself as a research person, and that identity was being denied and challenged every day. I have always been an overachiever and a perfectionist, but being in this kind of program with so many different kinds of responsibilities, working around 70 to 80 hours a week, it was tremendously difficult to do everything and be perfect on everything. And I used to like thinking of myself as a compassionate person. But then with the climate that I was surrounded with by successful and often younger individuals, I became competitive. And I used to be calm and peaceful, but then in a toxic academic environment, I was constantly anxious and I had meltdowns almost every day. I didn't have any time to do anything else outside of school, but to just slowly watch myself slipping away. And because my self-worth was built around my performance at school, my volunteer engagement outside of school, I feel like I was constantly failing and therefore constantly unworthy. I was beating myself up incessantly for every mistake I made and everything I said. And at times it felt like the meaning of life was lost. And this went on until I realized that I am building who I am as a person on impermanent, transient things, labels that I decided to give myself so life could have some meaning. Who was really building this person, this house that we live in? It is very fascinating that we hold on to patterns that used to motivate and protect us. And the society that we live in, we really hold on to the unique thing that shaped us as a person. And there are no problems with that. The problem only arises when we have changed and when situations have changed, are we still tightly grasping onto what we think we should have. In this life, we gain things along the way and we lose things along the way. To be honest, I don't know how my life turned out the way it did and why so much trauma occurred. Buddhism would certainly explain it through the past causes and conditions from our past lives and this life, intertwining with both good and bad karma since beginningless time. Still, in this lifetime, extraordinarily positive and lucky things happened that I couldn't really explain, and at the same time, really awful things also happened. And all of these things became what psychologists call the autobiographical memory, the life story of ours that we tell ourselves. So we spend our entire life building who we think we should be, trying to recognize and accept the life that happens around us. And then all of a sudden, an accident, a change of the environment, someone else's decision, the loss of a loved one, seem to turn all of those upside down. We may pride ourselves as a parent, someone's children, sibling, someone's significant other, and all of a sudden find ourselves sitting in an empty house all alone, and the life we know it has changed dramatically. And now we have to figure out how to move on without them and how to pick up the broken pieces and piece ourselves back together. We may thrive in a successful job environment, earning status and recognition, and then all of a sudden a more talented person come along. And then suddenly our abilities are being questioned. The house that we take as our refuge, spend so much time decorating, maybe flawed and broken in so many ways, and all of a sudden we're living in hell on earth. When we don't see life as transient, when we want things to never change, when we want things to always stay perfect, when we want bad things to never show up, that is when we suffer. When we place our truest sense of self and self-worth on impermanent things, thinking that it has to be permanent, that is when we suffer too. Life is not quite worth it if we think the things that will perish eventually is going to bring us permanent happiness. But that doesn't mean that we should live a life trying to be detached from everything and everyone. When we let go of who we must be and how life must play out, not only freedom arises, but also we're inviting life to come in. When we can smile and laugh at impermanence and how confusing life can be sometimes, that is a kind of equanimity. We can take ourselves less seriously and realize that I too am just a human being. I have made mistakes and I continue to make mistakes. I have loved and I have cried. I have been harmed and I have harmed others. Sending gratitude to ourselves and then let that moment go. We're allowed to cherish and feel joy and happiness when they show up. We're allowed to see ourselves as this open, spacious sky with the all-encompassing Mother Earth and still feel the full capacity of emotions. Like that morning bird that comes and visits our window every day, we can say hi and thank them for visiting. We can admire their beauty and the music they make, and then allow them to fly away. There's a story that Thich Nhat Hanh told. A man was rowing his boat upstream on a very misty morning. Suddenly, he saw another boat coming downstream, not trying to avoid him. It was coming straight at him. He shouted, "Be careful, be careful." But the boat came right into him, and his boat was almost sunk. The man was very angry and began to shout at the other person to give him a piece of his mind. But when he looked closely, he saw that there was no one in the other boat. It turned out that the boat just got loose and went downstream. All his anger vanished, and he laughed and laughed. When we're presented with suffering, it is important to see what it is that is causing us that suffering and who is keeping this suffering alive. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the metaphor of the second arrow. When unpleasant events occur, it is the first arrow, and our maladaptive responses to it are really the second arrow that we continue to give ourselves. When we see ourselves as this open, spacious existence, then really the arrows have no body to fall onto. It is important to say, though, in doing this, we're not denying, minimizing, or invalidating the sufferings we experience. It's kind of like doing improv. We say yes, and yes, that happened, and this is how I'm feeling. And I am so much more than how things may appear at this moment in time. It's not a way for us to deny, minimize, and invalidate the suffering of others. It's often tempting to use Buddhism as a form of spiritual bypass and end up invalidating a person's suffering. And we see this in Sangha sometimes, like blaming a person of color who experienced racism and say, well, they're too attached to their identity. Maybe they should just let go of this attachment to the identity. Or mistake the pride of one's race, sexuality, gender, and heritage as an absolute attachment to self. Or if someone is grieving and we blame ourselves and say, oh, but I understand impermanence. Why am I still so sad? And then I remember when most people were being quarantined in COVID, some would then say, oh, well, this is just how samsara is. We all have karma and we all suffer at some point. And it's important to not use Buddhist teachings to bypass our suffering in life. There is a passage in Buddha Gosa that I would like to share. Compassion is characterized as promoting the aspect of allaying suffering. Its function resided in not enduring other suffering. It is manifested as non-cruelty. The proximate cause is to see helplessness in those overwhelmed by suffering. It succeeds when it makes cruelty subside, and it fails when it produces sorrow. So it fails when it produces sorrow. When we use these teachings of impermanence, emptiness, and suffering to bypass a person's suffering, then we're not walking on the middle path. It becomes indifference and not wisdom. We can hold the suffering that we and others around us experience in openness and with space. We can feel it, accept it, and return it back to the universe. We can practice Buddhism, understand, forgive, send out metta and compassion to perpetrators while still advocating for social justice. At the end of the day, we must recognize that we are all fellow sentient beings, suffering in many different ways, but suffering nonetheless, in the exact same boat. And really, at the end of our journey, we have to get together to the other shore together as a team. And so with that said, I would like to end this talk with a blessing written by John O'Donohue called For Suffering. May you be blessed in the holy names of those who, without knowing it, help to carry and lighten your pain. May you know serenity when you are called to enter the house of suffering. May a window of light always surprise you. May you be granted the wisdom to avoid false resistance. When suffering knocks on the door of your life, may you glimpse its eventual gifts. May you be able to receive the fruits of suffering. May memory bless and protect you with the hard-earned light of past travail to remind you that you have survived before. And though the darkness is now deep, you will soon see approaching light. May the grace of time heal your wounds. May you know that though the storm may rage, not a hair of your head will be harmed. And if you could give me one more minute of your time, I would like us to join palms together and transfer the merits we have gained by simply being here today. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings attain happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings live in ease and equanimity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was so useful and inspirational. I'm going to take so much away from here today, and I'm going to be returning to the recording later on, especially the allowing ourselves to be transformed by trauma was something that I really touched me today. So much gratitude for your teaching and the wise words that you shared with us. And now, so we do have to start wrapping up something like 2 or 3 minutes before, so we can share links and things. So now it's time for the Q&A. And if you want to ask a question, you can either use the raise hand option when we will be calling you live, or you can type your question to the chat and or send it directly to me if you don't want your name to be mentioned. And I noticed that there was a question about the sources. I think it was like about who you were quoting, the names. The Thich Nhat Hanh I got, that's in the chat right now. Do you remember any other names, Vanessa, that you could share with people so they can go and Google?
Yes, I'll post that in the chat.
Okay, great. You can do it either now or at the end, because we will be sharing some links, keeping the room open for a few minutes after, so people can then get the links as well. So there is Norman is saying thank you, Maria, thank you, Verna is saying thank you, Scott is saying thank you, and Kimberly and Thomas, thank you, Vanessa. So applicable, sending gratitude and compassion. So now there is time for questions, like said, if you have some. I'm giving some space because I do have a question, but I can wait for a little while with mine. So Vanessa, could you share with us some practices that you yourself like doing in the difficult times, like different meditation practices? What kind of meditation practices do you do, especially that have to do with that self-compassion? Might be that people are interested in practical.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't specifically practice the self-compassion intervention because research shows that with individuals struggling with depression, it's more difficult to practice self-compassion. And I mentioned that I'm in recovery from depression, so I stay away from it. But the thing with self-compassion is when we practice non-self, self-compassion naturally arises. So I usually practice the meditation we did in the beginning, feeling that openness and interconnectedness. But we have to remember to be flexible. Sometimes the mind cannot relax and the mind cannot be open. And in that case, I will use the normal insight tradition meditation that I just feel, notice, naming and labeling the body. So yeah, I go between Mahayana mindfulness and Theravada mindfulness, depending on what I need in the moment. I don't know if that answered the question. Oh, I also chant as well. I chant, my traditional Buddhist heritage teaches me to chant. So I also chant the name of Bodhisattva and imagining inheriting the wisdom of past, present, and future Buddha and Bodhisattva.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. It was useful. So there's a question about, I'm sorry, please forgive me, cleansing practice. Was that a Chinese or Hawaiian practice?
Yes, that is an ancient Hawaiian practice. It doesn't come from Buddhism, but I find it to be very, very consistent with each other.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
For the quotes, I found that there was a lot of quotes that I use. Is it okay if I send it to you, Susanna, afterwards, and then you can send it to people that have come to this today?
No, I don't know how to do that.
Okay, let me try and copy and paste them all then. It was quite a lot.
Yeah, okay, so people can get that. Yeah, so we can see now the Ajahn Chah, Bodhiana, from Bodhiana. And then there's the Thich Nhat Hanh quote. And John O'Donohue.
Sorry, there was a lot of quotes.
I think it's very good that you post them because somebody put in the chat that they're trying to write it down so that they can go and Google it after. So it's very useful to have these quotes. And I think that everybody can save the quote, the chat when you go to more. and save chat or some other, was it some other place? Oh, no, when you go to the chat box and there are 3 dots, there's the picture of a sheet where a corner has been folded, then there's a face, smiley face, and then there's 3 dots. So when you click on the 3 dots, you can click save chat, and then you can save the chat. I think it's available for everybody. Okay, so we are going to start wrapping up. So again, I will thank you, Vanessa, for your teaching. It was very inspiring. And about Dana, so your generosity can help to strengthen the recovery community and to grow the academy, and can be a practical expression of gratitude and metta. So it's a very good way to practice Buddhism. We invite you to practice generosity and to give dana in support of these teachings to be shared with our teacher and with the Buddhist Recovery Network. And there will be a link in the chat that will lead you to the BRN website. So Calico, if you can post that. And please indicate that your gift is for Academy. And then there is a page with podcasts. It hasn't been updated since Kevin Griffin, so it's some time ago. But Calico, if you happen to have that link and the link to the videos, because this teaching will be quite shortly put up there to the video, so you can go back and listen to this again. And the next BRN Academy event is on Sunday, August the 7th, with Carol Cano. Hopefully I got that pronounced correctly. And I'm checking the chat once more if there is something else. Steve is sending sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So it's like, I know it in Finnish. Vanessa, what is it in English? Sadhu. It's like celebrations.
Can't say in many things, but it could also be understood as so may it be, or so it is, or a wise person. It depends on translation.
Yes, so very good place to say it at the end of an excellent teaching. And then we have a Facebook group, and hopefully we will get the link to the Facebook group also to the chat. And once more, the transference of merits in a little bit shorter version. So thank you everybody for joining us today. May the merit gained benefit all living beings. May we all be well, happy, and peaceful. Thank you very much. We will keep the room open for a few minutes for you to copy the links. And if you want to open the mic and say hi, that's okay also at this point. So other than that, have a nice 4th of July weekend. And whatever you have on your weekend, if it's morning or evening, so good night sleep or nice day or nice summer or life. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.